Hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast, Conversations of Substance. I'm here with my friend Benoit-Antoine President and Vice Chancellor of Carleton University, and a pleasure to see you here today, Benoit.
Thanks for having me, Gord. It's great to see you.
Thanks
for the invitation.
Well, you know, and we're talking about substance, mental health, substance use health, and of course, we're both personally involved in this story and professionally involved. And so I just wondered, your journey, how did it start? What are you doing today?
Okay, it's a big question to start, Gord. Let's see. Let me just say, I always say yes when people ask me to speak about mental health or substance use. We don't talk enough about those issues, and every time that I do, there's a few people that say, "Thank you for doing that. I didn't think you could." So I think that's what you're doing. You're inviting people to have those conversations. They're important conversations, and that's what we're doing today. We're inviting people into the conversation, because if we don't talk about it, there's no forward movement, there's no solutions, there's no progress, and people suffer alone and feel dreadful, and that's not good. So I've been sharing my own story, my own personal story of growing up in a dysfunctional and abusive family, and you always think when you grow up in a place like this that one day you're going to be free from that. You're going to be able to just walk away and just have a beautiful life. I used to think that, honestly. But then that's not exactly what happens, because you've learned the wrong things. You've been conditioned the wrong way. Yeah. And that's hard to explain. But in essence, you're conditioned to think that the world is dangerous, and that you're an ineffective member of that world, and that it puts you in an impossible situation. And the emotional states that result from that are very difficult to bear. Yes. And to get a bit of help from dealing about these feelings and emotional states, you turn very quickly to substance use as a form of self-medication. My line, which I think we've discussed before, is from the perspective of the substance user. The substance use is not a problem; it's an attempted solution. It's what you do
and one that works going. Initially, right?
Well, it works for a long time.
Yeah,
it works for a long time, and I used to be ashamed of the substance use that I used to do, but now I'm proud of it in a funny way, because it got me through hard times, and now I'm here.
Yes.
So I'm grateful to these younger versions of myself that did what they had to do to survive and to keep going, and to allow me to heal and to continue to transform myself. So that's become a big part of my professional life as well. I took a first degree in psychology because when you grow up in the kind of family that I grew up in, things don't make sense, and I thought psychology maybe will substitute sense for that. Will become a surrogate sense of what it means to be human, and what it is to live a human life. And that worked out for me. Psychology is a great science. And then I did a PhD in neuroscience to try to understand how the brain works, on the assumption that the brain runs the whole thing, which I'm no longer so sure about today. I think it's more complicated than that. And over time took on leadership positions within university, and this is really why I started to talk about mental health and substance use, is out of a sense of responsibility to the university community to be honest about those things. Because there's 40,000 people at Carleton University. Imagine how many are facing or dealing with some sort of mental health struggle or substance use. It's a lot of people.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And if as a leader I don't talk about it, I fail at leadership. I'm being dishonest and hypocritical, and I say, here is not a space of honesty. Here is a space of repression, and good luck to you. So I'm trying to do the other. I'm trying to do the opposite. I'm trying to talk honestly about those things.
Yeah. Well, and I think, in fact, you are creating the opposite environment at Carleton. I noticed in the annual report this year that substance use is in the report, the work that is being done around that on campus. That idea that this is going to be an issue for some people, and for some people it'll just be a pleasure. But the idea that there's resources and that we can openly talk about that, it's past conversation, it's in black and white, it's in writing, it's in the report. I was marveled at that, to be honest with you, Benoit, to just imagine that we had come to a place through leadership, in my opinion, that a university can openly talk about this experience that some of their students are absolutely going to have.
A lot of credit to the Carleton community over the years. When those conversations started at Carleton about 10 years ago, well before I joined the community, about 10 years ago, the university started to formalize plans around student mental health on the one hand,
Yep.
And about faculty and staff healthy workplace on the other hand. So 10 years of building common vocabulary about healthy workplace, about how to take care of our physical and mental health. And over the course of that journey, over the course of the past decade, people came to increasingly realize at Carleton and in broader society that mental health is a big part of health and of healthy workplace. So that became integrated as well. And recently we're doing the same thing around substance use as a part of mental health, and mental health as a part of global health. For me, all those issues are interrelated.
Yes.
And it doesn't make sense to parse them. They need to be looked at holistically, and that's what we're doing today.
So I'm excited to talk then about our WOW Festival next year. The MC at Recovery Day Ottawa a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
That's been something we've worked on and hosted for 8 years. And now we're going to the WOW Festival, which is working on wellness, bringing substance use health, mental health, and physical health under the same umbrella. It doesn't seem like rocket science, but it's never been done before. And so I just wondering your thoughts on that, Benoit.
Well, that completely aligns with my own thinking. It's funny because I'm a scientist, I suppose, at least to some degree. And the way science works, you need to isolate parts of the whole so as to study them. Mm-hmm. And as specializations turn to subspecialization, the part that you're looking at becomes increasingly narrow, and there's incredible power to doing that, but there's also the significant risk once you've broken things down into so many narrow slices that putting things together back again may not be possible, right? So when you look at something as broad as human health, including what it means to live a life that is whole and free and purposeful, and you start to chop that up into specialty and subspecialties, well, eventually what you have is policies and structures that deal with only some aspects of health. But turns out that a lot of the interesting and impactful aspects arise at the border of those subspecialties. That's why we talk about multidisciplinarity. So I think now there's a movement to try to put things back together in a more holistic way. And I think that's what you're proposing to do with this new event, to say, we're not going to talk only about substance use. Substance use and mental health, well, in my view, are the same thing, but we'll at least agree that they're closely interrelated.
Absolutely.
And then both of them impact physical health in a bilateral way very powerfully. So can we just talk about how to lead a human life that is healthy, that is fruitful, that is holistic, that is self-determined, and that is purposeful? And for that, you need to talk about all those things.
So I'm not going to cry when you say that, but I want to, right? Because when you say those words, and I know that's coming from a place of, as a president of Carleton University, it's coming as a community leader in Canada, but it's also coming as Benoit the person. And
mostly the second part.
And I hear in the change from the youth, and my youth identifies with your youth, that learned ways to survive their experience so that we could get to a place of living our lives and setting survival aside.
Yeah, yeah.
And then how will I live? And that place is a place that I personally would like to see Canadians move to, a place of living with meaning and purpose. And I believe this conversation that we're having today is one that Canadians will have and say, yeah, how come if walking supports my mental health and my mental health supports my substance use health, how come it's over there? And how comes I have a walking path, but I don't have a like a mental health chill place. I don't have a place, you know, our structure in our society has got supports around physical health and access around physical health that they don't have around mental health. They don't have around substance use health. So I just wonder your thoughts about the future a little bit.
God, there's a lot in your question. You start with the distinction between surviving and living or thriving. If you're fortunate to be raised in a secure and supportive environment, I suppose that is your birthright to go straight to living. But I think we need to be honest that not everyone has that opportunity, not by a long shot in my view, though we find it difficult to be honest about this.
Yes.
I think we as a society deeply underestimate the level of trauma that we're all facing. And trauma takes different form. Trauma doesn't have to be overt. Emotional responsiveness, the lack of it, is a form of trauma, right? If you're young and there's no emotional responsiveness, your neural pathways, your neural network will adapt in a way to deal with that trauma, and then that shapes your thinking patterns, that shapes your behavior, and then you need to go on a bit of a journey to heal from that, to recover that right to live, to thrive, as opposed to surviving. I think the only way to start that collective journey of healing is to be more honest about the level of trauma that we're all facing. Some of it chronic, some of it acute. Like we've all gone through at least some events.
Absolutely.
I don't know, car accidents, medical interventions, bullying at school, heartbreaks. In addition to the less than optimal family environments in which we were raised, or the less than optimal school environments in which we're all dealing, at least to some degree, with splintered parts of our personality, because that's what trauma does. It takes the infant as a whole being, and through fear, splinters parts of it that stay behind. Right? Yes. Does that make sense to you? That's why we say. I'm broken. This captures this idea that various parts of your personalities have splintered off through trauma, and then these splinter parts of the personality, which are fearful or which are angry, act out in the world. They become activated by stimuli in the world, and then they act out. And people say, "I just lost it. I don't know what happened. I just lost it." That's because an inner wound that was the result of trauma became activated, and a behavioral pattern emerged out of that. So that journey of healing from trauma is to become whole again, but that demands work. For me, some of that work was achieved with the help of substances. No longer, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that. And we can spend some time talking about the strategy of substance use in that journey, and the continuum of substance use on that journey, because that's interesting too.
Yeah. Well, and the resiliency factor in this idea of wholeness and you know, the idea that broken is not unrepairable, right?
For sure.
But it's the place where we start the repairing at, is the acknowledgement of brokenness. And so what could be more traumatizing than daily understanding that we're devouring the planet that we live on? You know, what can be more traumatizing in survival mechanism, this sort of social divide that's been going on, this camp setting, the inability to have civil discourse, speaks about all this absolutism and survivalism, and not an ability to live and be with others, you know. Does that make any sense?
It makes complete sense. I was speaking about the past as a source of trauma, and what you're adding, 100% correct, is that the present is also a source of stress and trauma. We all face difficult circumstances in our lives. Maybe our parents are aging or sick. Maybe our children are facing difficulties, marital difficulties, job difficulties. The pace of modern life is trauma in and of itself. And then you bring in this very, very powerful idea that worry about the future, whether your own personal future or a future as a society or a future as a planet is a source of fear, right? So I think you'll agree with me that there's not a person that can say, I don't have trauma from the past, I don't have difficult circumstances in the present, and I don't have any worries about the future. Is there such a person?
I think there are people that would say that, but I think that they just need to come a place of understanding, and that's their resilience, and that's their denial, and that's their self-protection. That means I'm surviving, and that's being mistaken survival for living. And so I think that's what a lot of people live in is, and you hear it in the language of the day-to-day world. How are you doing? Oh, I'm surviving. People will tell that to you.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, you're driving a car, live in a house, and have a job, and you're just surviving? You're not able to live yet? And so we're referencing our experiences, and that sounds like a traumatic voice speaking. I'm surviving, you know?
Well, there's a form of honesty in that.
Yeah.
Right. There's a form of honesty, but we don't always hear it. Right.
Yeah.
When people say I'm surviving, it's a form of crack in the denial. And there's an opportunity there to open a conversation the way that you just did. Oh, well, your life seems pretty good to me. So why do you describe it as surviving? That's interesting to me, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
But we need to have those conversations. I don't know how else to put it. I think we're encouraged. I'm not sure how. It's very subtle, right? But I think we're encouraged to adopt an external behavior that projects a form of a wholeness and confidence, whether or not we feel that. I think we're encouraged to do that, and I think we're conditioned to think that our personal success, our professional success, are conditional to being able to show that balanced self, you know, that comfortable, confident self, when in reality, inside you're surviving.
Don't you know how to act, right? And so you act in a way to be successful, and so there's something in that word "act" that has a dishonest component.
Yeah,
to
you're
it.
so right. You're so right about that. You're so right about that.
You know. I was wondering again, if I can, on resilience, because I think the environment that, you know, Carleton University, the campus, 40,000 people, exams, leaving home, meeting new people, all highly stressful events. And so that idea that, yes, this will be stressful, but how do I be resilient in that? How do we teach people skill sets around that so that strengthens us rather than challenges us and sometimes harms us?
An important development and an important new approach that we've implemented over the past 5 years, I would say, is a continuum of mental health approach with our students, but also with our faculty and staff. So it's not binary, eh?
Yeah.
You're not either well, oh, you're well, so I'm not going to worry about you, or unwell. In the old days, that was some sort of moral failing, I suppose, if you were unwell.
Not up to it, really.
Yeah, maybe.
You know what I mean? That kind of language.
Yeah.
You know, this may be a little too much for you.
Too much for all of those things. Yeah. Maybe it's a lack of ability. Maybe it's a moral failing, but it's bad in any case.
Exactly.
I don't think that's an accurate reflection of the reality at all. I think that's a construct that, fortunately, is going by the wayside. As I was trying to say before, I think all of us at various times in our lives are in a continuum of mental health. Sometimes things seem to be going well, and we're engaged and curious and loving as opposed to fearful, and that's great. And there's things you can do to stay in that state. And we acknowledge that, and we have that programming available for students. Sometimes the stress gets a little bit too much. We have programming for that. It could be as simple as engaging in a yoga session, or engaging with one of our therapy dogs.
Yeah.
And then you can get into more serious anxiety or depression or substance use. Yeah. And it's important to engage peer support and various other initiatives, and then into the more severe crises issues. But if you're only talking of mental health at the end of that spectrum with the severe crisis issues, then you're kind of too late in the game. You're kind of too late in the game. You got to address the whole spectrum. So we're doing that. And what I'm hoping we're going to do, but that's a difficult conversation to have in the context of a university which has been going on a particular model for at least 100 years, maybe longer. The way we conceive of our mission is to teach people how to think. Okay, and if your mental health interferes with your thinking, we're going to we're going to address it, we're going to support you, and we're going to bring you back to a place where you can get back to thinking and learning. But a different way to look at this, Gord, is that thinking on the one hand and feeling or being or living, they're not separate. They're one and the same. Mm. And whereas I know we're doing a good job of teaching how to think, I'm not so sure that our curriculum is designed to do a good job to teach us how to feel and how to be whole, how to interact as a full human being. And part of that is opening that conversation to say, what does it actually mean to live a human life that is healthy and that is whole and that is free and that is self-determined? What does that mean? It has to be more than a good job and the ability to consume. It has to be more than that.
Well, evidently, because we can't seem to consume enough. You know, if I can just go on a bit of a riff here, we can cut it out later.
Go for it.
So, you know, it's at that magic moment in this late 70s, early 80s when we designed closet organizers so we get more in our closet because they were full, but we didn't have enough. And so this idea that we can consume and have enough comfort in our lives to soothe us, because I see that as a soothing behavior. And you look at our society and we have more people homeless now, and we have more people with wealth now. And so it seems they don't have enough yet that they can share. And so they're dissatisfied at both ends of the spectrum.
A really ungenerous way to look at our society. If I was to take an extreme view of how we seem to have set up the society, is that having people afraid and unhappy is a good thing for business, because through the proper conditioning, they can be led to believe that consuming will make those feelings of unhappiness or of not being enough disappear. But the fact of the matter is that it won't. I don't think anybody can point to one example of someone who was unhappy or fearful or feeling that they were not enough and managed to buy their way out of that condition through materialistic means. So we need to rethink that.
You would have loved an essay I wrote an awful long time ago, Benoit, on the fact that they sell you fair on the front page of the newspaper, and they sell you a sweater to buy on the back page, so you'd be not so scared.
Right.
It's an insidious relationship, and yet there's a validity to news that's really important in our world and to understanding the world concepts. But I also think that fearful living creates fearful results. And that there's what if I didn't have to be happy?
Can I jump in there?
Absolutely.
I think what you're pointing to is that we're conditioned to believe, and again, it's hard to pinpoint where the conditioning comes from, but we're conditioned to believe that there is an emotional state that we should be experiencing, and we call it happiness, I suppose. That's what you should be experiencing. And if you're not, then by definition there's something wrong with you, and then there's the list of solutions that are sold to address your unhappiness, right?
Yeah.
But what if this was flipped around? What if there was no specific way that you were supposed to feel? What if what you were feeling is exactly what you were supposed to feel? And instead of trying to get rid of those feelings or trying to repress them or do away with them, you sat with them and experienced them and see where they came from. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. Well, I can tell you it didn't for about the first 60 years of my life.
Right.
Because I didn't know how to live. I was one of those people, I read the books when I was a kid, and it said in a place long ago, and in a time long ago, in a place far away, and I thought that made it a fairy tale. But it was the last line in the book, happily ever after, that was the fairy tale. And I truly believe that if I wasn't happy, there was something wrong with the world, and more importantly, there was something wrong with me, and something had to be done. I had no idea that I might be having an authentic emotional response to the circumstances of my life.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That is an authentic emotional response to the circumstances of your life. But that's not what we're taught. We're taught what you're feeling is wrong, and we're going to cure it either pharmaceutically or through some sort of behavioral methods or through consumerism. But then there's no healing there.
Which kind of works on a commercial basis.
Well, yeah.
You know, I'll just slide that in there. But let's talk about solutions rather than where we are. And I think one of the things that we're talking about right now is that to get to somewhere, we always have to know where we are. And so you've said a couple times, Benoit, it's difficult to have this conversation. It's difficult people to see this. And so what I hear in that is the difficulty to know where we're starting from so we can get to somewhere else. And I think that when you say to me our institutions are taught up around thinking, but they're not set up around living in emotions, that for me is a real starting place, that you're really putting a flag in the ground and saying, here's our starting place. Can anybody join me in this thought?
Well, I've been floating the idea. People are not rushing to say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? I feel a responsibility to our students to set them up, not only for professional success. That seems easy enough to me, but for a self-determined life where, in your words, they can accept that the emotions that they're feeling are legitimate given the circumstances of their lives, and if they look at that honestly, they have the power. I think that's the right word. They have the power to transform themselves in a way that will bring them to wholeness and to freedom. And if they're lucky, to a form of purpose, and from that will come contributions. Like you, I came to these realizations late, but the idea that if you change the world, it will make yourself okay inside, I think is inverted. I think if you transform yourself inside, then that will change the world.
And where's the locus of control? Right? Out here is the dream. I'd love to change the world, but I don't have the power, and so I got to kind of yell at the world or smell it or smile at the world or do something out there to try to control others. So I'm not much of a friend anymore because now I know how you have to be, so I'm happy. But in here, if I can be how I should be, then the world is the world. You know, and it's going to rain some days. It doesn't actually rain on me. Evidently it's a cloud system. It's a climate system. And we lose that idea that it's all about me. 7 billion people. How can it be all about me? How can it be all about you?
Right. And earlier you brought in the dichotomy between fear and survival and living, which I associate with love. There needs to be a kind of universal feeling of, well, this is great. It's not perfect, but this is great, and I'm grateful to be here. And if you move from a place of love, the chance that the impact that you have in the world be loving and positive is greater than if you move from a place of fear.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. The odds of, exactly as you just expressed it, Benoit, right? If I'm compassionate and loving, then the world's naturally better than if I'm fearful and grasping and seeking.
Yeah.
How can it not be?
Seems to me. Seems to me.
Okay. So I'm inspired as ever by having our time together, Benoit, and I'm trying to come up with that penultimate question, if we haven't already covered some of these things, in terms of last thoughts and hopes and wishes for others. And again, I want to respect that today we've seen you as the president of Carleton University, we've seen you as Benoit, and we've seen you as a friend, we've seen you as a neighbor in our conversations. And so we covered that. And I want to, I guess, ask you what it's like to have a business card that could capture you, and how you manage to stay Benoit and still have the business card and still be president as a role.
I'll say something else as I think about that.
Sure.
Because I'd never thought about that before. As we're wrapping up, you're preparing to wrap up.
Yeah.
You wanted to talk about substance use and mental health, and I think we did. I think we covered some ground.
Yeah.
But I think I want to close by saying that in my experience, healing's always possible. Healing's always possible. And maybe there's value in being more explicit about the fact that perhaps the goal of these human lives that we're given is to heal towards wholeness and freedom and self-determination. And everything else should support that. So I never know exactly how to say this, but we tend to work through outcomes. We imagine outcomes in our minds, and we say, I'm just going to work towards these outcomes. I'll get married, or I'll have kids, or I'll have money, or I'll travel. And then we work towards these outcomes, and we think once I have these outcomes, I'll have achieved and I'll be happy. But it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. I think the only thing that we should work towards is turning inwards. How can I be whole again, and how can I get rid of fear, and how can I embrace an intention that is more loving? And from that intention will flow all sorts of good outcomes. And I think this is in the power of everyone to do. And Gord, I think the reason you mentioned the business card, I find it kind of funny. I happen to be the president of Carleton University today, but that I never planned to do that. That's not an outcome I sought, but through the work I did, that's an opportunity that I had, and now I fulfill the role to the best of my ability based on what I think is right, and based on my values and the way that I think I can contribute. But the role has no value outside of that, if that means anything to you.
Yeah. Yeah. There's an old story about the Monopoly board, and are you the thimble, are you the shoe? Or does that represent your play on the board? And true mastery is when I'm just playing and I'm me, and this is what I do in this world. And so I'm feeling honored today, Benoit is the term that comes to my mind, to be spending time with you and sharing ideas. And I'm very grateful for that. And truly meaningful for me. And so thank you very much.
Well, thanks to you, Gord. I don't know if you said it, that we're friends, right? Did you say that at the beginning? We became friends through our respective works and our respective life experience, and I'm always happy to support what you do. It's been great to see CAPSA grow by leaps and bounds in terms of budget, in terms of staff, but especially in terms of impact. You're now a national organization, and I was thrilled to come and just chat with you and advance the important work that you're doing. Thank you.
That's great. And you know, we can cut this out, but I kind of baited you on the WOW Festival for next year.
You know where to find me.
Okay.
You know where to find me.
All the best, everyone. Thanks a lot.